Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Tell Your Story. I'm your host, Todd Nesloni, and each episode I look to bring you a different guest who has encouraged, inspired, or challenged me in one way or another and bring them on to share some of their story in hopes that it inspires you to tell some of yours. I'm excited today for my guest, Shane Saeed, on with me. Shane, thank you so much for being here. Tell everybody kind of who you are.
Thanks for having me, Todd. I am Shane Saeed. I'm a fourth grade teacher in Colorado, and most people might know me as Fantastically Fourth from Instagram.
Awesome. Well, Shane, whenever I start these questions and these conversations, I always love to start with the same question first. And that is, when you were a kid, what did you dream you were going to be? And does it align at all with what you're doing now?
I think if I were completely honest about what I wanted to be when I was a kid, it was a pop star. So I would say most likely not. But it wasn't until high school that I really found my calling for education.
Was there a certain kind of thing that happened that made you see that this is really the path that I want to go down?
It was senior year, and I had some friends. We were all sitting talking about what we were going to be majoring in, and I had one friend that wanted to be a neurosurgeon, and I had another one that wanted to be a chemical engineer. And I was sitting there twiddling my thumbs, going, "I'm not quite sure what I want to do." I thought I wanted to go into the mental health realm, and wasn't quite sure if that was what was perfect for
Yeah.
me. And they kept kind of probing me questions. Well, what do you really like to do? What do you do for work right now? Like, well, I'm a day camp counselor and I've been doing that for 4 years, and I coach kids sports through the city, and I love working with kids. It's my
Yeah.
pride and joy. And they're like, well, why don't you work with kids for the remainder of your life? Why don't you become an educator? I was like, that is a great idea. And from there on, it was just like laser
Mhm.
focus on education.
Did it surprise anybody in your family that that was the route you were choosing?
Yes, very much so. Both of my parents are in business,
Uh-huh.
in sales, in operations, and in buying. So
Uh,
when I said I wanted to go into education, I got a lot of, "Are you sure about that? Is that really what you want?" But I knew, especially from all of the take your kid to work days,
mhm.
that business was not what I wanted
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. And so, you decide that education's the path you want to take. And are you immediately drawn to elementary, or did you consider secondary in there too?
I was immediately drawn to elementary, and I think a lot of that was around the kids that I was working with through high school.
Right.
I did day camps during the summer, and then throughout the school year, I would help coach camps of like flag football and basketball and softball and t-ball and um, tons of just different sports. And it was always 4 to 10 was kind of the age range that I worked with.
Yeah.
And I knew I really enjoyed working with those students or those kids. They
Right.
weren't students yet to me.
Well, I love though that your original dream was to be a pop star. And so obviously my question is going to be, do you find yourself singing a lot in class or with different lessons that you do?
Oh, 100%. I was in choir from 3rd grade to 12th grade. I played soccer too, but singing was a really big part of my life when I blew out my knee and
Mhm.
couldn't play for a couple years in high school.
Yeah.
So I kind of threw myself into vocal lessons, and
Mhm.
it became a really big piece of my life. It kind of fell off of my plate as
Mhm.
I got into college, but I sing every chance I can get.
Yeah. I love it. And that's so great for like elementary kids too, because I am not a singer. I have never claimed to be. I will sing in front of no one. There were some little things I would do in front of my class, but that's only because, with kids that age, like they don't even care. Like they're all singing at the top of their lungs anyway. So I always enjoyed that about elementary. But I say bravo to people like you who can carry a tune and sing and then bring that to the class. I'm like, dang, you're like one of those triple threat people. It's like I could sing in class just to get by, but they actually want to hear you in class. And so I love that. Well, Shane, at some point though, you decide that you are going to start connecting via social media. And so what
Mhm.
was that kind of moment for you when you thought, I'm going to start putting myself out there?
It was going into my 3rd year of teaching, and I was being moved out of the building. Um, I had a beautiful classroom, and I was moving into the portable classroom outside of the building.
Been there, done that.
Yep. And I had a friend that I was going through grad school with, and she had a teacher Instagram. And so she kind of introduced me, and shout out to Emily Kelly, the mountain teacher. She's the one that said, there's this great community.
Yeah.
And if you're doing this whole switching out to the portables, I also knew that because I was going to be in a portable classroom, I was slotted to have about 32 students, and
Wow.
the space was incredibly small. So
Yeah.
I actually started the flip to flexible learning spaces and flexible seating when I went out to the portables as well. So I started my Instagram to kind of chart my journey into flexible seating in this
Mhm.
teeny tiny space.
Well, but what I find though, and I've had this conversation in just about every Tell Your Story, is that when we as educators get brave enough to start sharing some of what we're doing on social media, very quickly, regardless of the amount of followers you have, the feedback you get, you can begin to feel this comparison thing happening. You can begin to have doubt creep in, like, oh, I don't care how many followers I have. I don't care if the last thing I shared had 100 likes. Like, I feel so insecure pressing submit right now because I just saw they did something so much better. Like, how do you keep doubt at bay so it doesn't take root and just fester in you?
I think I was really lucky to not actually know the extent of how big the community was when I first started. I think I had about 500 followers my first year, and I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
And I'd get like 20 likes on a post, and I thought that was so cool. Like, there were people I didn't know that were liking my posts, and that was good enough for me. So part of me is really glad that I didn't quite know the realm of how big the teacherverse is online, um, because I wasn't comparing myself, which was helpful. But then as it grew, I did start to realize, like, there are these really big accounts. There's this pressure to make sure that your content is really wonderful and that people are connecting with it. And I finally, there are days that I feel it, and second guess myself. But for the most part, I'm like, this is my story though. Like, this is what I'm doing, and I'm happy to take feedback on things that are going to make my craft better. But if it's just people having opinions, like, they're welcome to their opinion.
I love that kind of mindset though, because I think so often we have to own our own brilliance, and we have to just know that what you are doing is fantastic for you. Like, it doesn't have to compare to somebody else. And I think of your journey, and that was very similar to mine. And when I got started on social media, it was just a place for me to organize what I was doing. Like, that's why I started it. And then, like you said, like, the first time somebody liked or retweeted or favorited something, I was like, that I didn't know who they were, and I was like, whoa, somebody actually liked that. Like, that's so cool. But I find that as you become more where people are more checking out your account, and more then you come with more opinions to what you're saying too. And so you said something really important that I'd like to just spend a second asking about is, how do you know people, one of my friends uses the words keyboard warriors. Some people are very different online than if you were to meet them in person and have a conversation, and they're very opinionated behind a computer screen. So how do you not allow the opinions of others to make you then begin to second guess what you're doing?
I think it still comes from that understanding of, like, knowing what you're doing is inherently good.
Yeah.
And a lot of times things that I put, there's difference in, like, I didn't like the way that you presented this, or have you thought about using this in your classroom as well? And it's like, what you see is a drop. And so a lot of times what I send back is, what you see is a drop in the bucket of what happens in my classroom. And to be able to judge what I do, or how I teach, or how I impact my students on a picture that you saw is really hard. Like, I wouldn't want to judge someone off of one picture as well. I had someone reach out to me one time, and I had this, like, this chart. It's a pocket chart with
Mhm.
strips of paper in it, and it has all of the student choices for their independent work. So,
Mhm.
like, it's kind of menu style. You do what you want when you want to, um, building time management skills and whatnot.
Right.
And I had run out of my strips of pocket paper, and so I had uh, up at the top it said social studies work or social studies packet, and then I squeezed in at the top science because I didn't have another piece of paper to stick in the pocket. So I just like squeezed it in on one of the ones that was already there. And I had someone reach out to me and say, and like go on this whole tirade about how science and education is pushed off to the side. And she can
Mhm.
tell I don't honor science as I should in my classroom based off of the
Yeah.
fact that I squeezed science into this teeny tiny
Yeah.
place. And, a lot of it is not taking it personally, but I
Mhm.
responded back to her saying, one, I would appreciate if you wouldn't judge me on this one
Yeah.
picture. Two, I ran out of paper, so that's kind of the reason why behind it.
Yeah.
And three, I'd like let me tell you about my science
Mhm.
and how we do it at my school. And we take an entire day. We do Monday through
Mhm.
Thursday literacy and math, and then Fridays are dedicated to science and social studies because we realized we weren't spending enough time on it. So
Yeah.
I was like, I'm, we are doing the things, but
Well,
you might
you
not
said
see them.
something really great there though about, social media is just a drop in the bucket. It doesn't show the whole thing. And what I find is it doesn't matter how much you share, you're still never seeing the full picture. And so I think you said something really powerful there was it's like, like when people come with their opinions, like me as, I don't mind you like saying, "Hey, why did you do that? Where'd that idea come from?" Like push me, question me. But then when somebody would say something like that, like, well, clearly you don't value science, it's like, okay, that's one picture. Let me explain why science was small on there. And then, like, take the time to get to know where people are coming from because you don't know the whole picture. Even if they share 20 posts a day of what's going on in their classroom, you still don't know the whole picture of what's going on in the classroom. So I love that you shared that. Um, well, Shane, when you look back at your life and you think about the things you've been through, the good, the bad, the trials, the successes, and you reflect on your path, what is something that really stands out in your mind as being really instrumental into creating the woman we see today?
Oh, that's a big
I
question.
know there's probably lots of examples here. I always preface with that too. So don't feel like you're choosing one over the other, but what's one just that comes to mind?
Oh man, I don't know if it's just one event. I
Yeah.
know that I've had impactful people in my life that have really pushed me to do the things that are out of my comfort zone that have really led me to do great things.
Right.
My parents, I know that my dad is he always told us that we were the moths. Or no, we were not the moths. Oh my goodness. I'm already like completely messing this up. We're the flame. So he always told us to be the flame as we were growing up. So
Oh, wow.
be the flame because those are the flame is what brings people
Mhm.
to you, what brings the
Yeah.
moth to them. So constantly be the flame. I had a strong mom who constantly was instilling not only empathy in me, but also the strength and resilience of you
Right.
are amazing and you are wonderful. And, whatever you're going to do, as long as you get in front of someone, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, and then I think in terms of education, I would say that my current principal has had a really big impact on me.
Right.
I know that we met when I came to get your lead on when you guys came to Denver.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I went into education wanting to be a teacher, but also knowing that I wanted to be a principal as well.
Right.
Um, and I didn't quite know when that was going to happen. And 3 years into teaching, I was really struggling
Mhm.
with uh, just the stress and not knowing if this was the right thing for me. And I knew that I loved what I was doing, but it shouldn't be so hard.
Yeah.
Um, and then we had a new administrator come in, and he is just wonderful and so
Aw.
supportive. And it just completely flipped around what school was for me too.
Right.
And not only that, he sought me out to be like, you are a leader and
Mhm.
you need to continue to pursue that. And I'm going to give you those opportunities here, but you need to do that as well
Yeah.
on your end. And so he's really the one that kind of pushed me to go get my administrative license that I just finished this May. And we're hopefully going to be in a doctoral program together in January.
Aw.
So I really feel that I don't know if it's necessarily, there are events that are impactful, but for me, it's
Right.
more like who are the people that are continuing to push me forward.
I love that. And I love the 3 different reasons why you mentioned the 3 people you mentioned, so I love that as well. Well, when you think on, this year especially has been a year of firsts for everybody in our world dealing with COVID-19. And so I'd love to know, what effect has that had on you? How are you holding up knowing you also, like the rest of us, didn't get a goodbye for our kids?
I mean, it was hard.
Mhm.
I had a lot of families that, I mean, no matter what, if you're in my class ever, you are my kid. But it was hard knowing that I had families reaching out and saying, we just feel gypped that we didn't have
Mhm.
3 more months,
Yeah.
because it was such a good year.
Yeah.
Uh, and I think every year feels like that for me these days, or these years, is just as long as you build that community, it feels just so wonderful. So not having that closure was it was difficult. I know that I specifically have students that, change is hard. Change is hard on
Mhm.
me.
Mhm.
I feel it not only psychologically but physiologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I worried about their well-being,
Mhm.
not having the structure of
Right.
this is how it always is. Um, I was excited about the possibility of educators stepping out of their comfort
Mhm.
zones with technology. I
Right.
think that it was a really big shift, and educators did a great job of
Mhm.
stepping into a digital learning role.
Yeah.
And I'm really hoping we can take that momentum
Yeah.
and bring it into next
Mhm.
year and continue using 21st century resources,
Right.
because that's what our students need.
Yeah, I completely agree. And going off of something you said there, I'd love to know, what do you do to take care of you?
Oh, so my boyfriend and I lift every single night. Um, we take one day off, but we work out together every night. So even in quarantine, like we now can outfit an entire home gym, and we live in 700 square feet. So behind me
Right.
is like the pile of all of our things. But so we work out, and we work out pretty diligently. I love to listen to podcasts if I need to wind
Mhm.
down.
Right.
Weirdly enough, I love true crime, and that I
Me
wouldn't say calms me
too.
down. Okay, good. Some people think I'm crazy,
Mhm.
but
No, my wife can't stand like listening to audiobooks or anything like that. But anytime we get in the car to drive somewhere, she goes, "Is there a new crime podcast we can listen to?" And
yes,
she's such a nervous person. Like she's always like somebody's gonna break into our house, and she doesn't watch scary movies, like any of that. But she's like, "Give me a crime podcast or a crime show, I will watch that or listen to that all day long."
yes, and I have like my rotation of crime podcasts that I listen to in the morning, and I slip in I have my NPR, and then I have
Mhm.
my teaching podcasts. I have your podcast and my district's education podcast,
Well,
but
I'd love to know, is there a crime podcast that's like one of your favorites or one that you'd recommend to people?
My Favorite Murder is amazing. I've seen them live twice now.
Ah, really?
It's Karen and Georgia, and it's a comedy true crime podcast. So
Uh-huh.
that's why I really like it, because it's never ever making fun or light of what the victim went through, but it's like mainly focused on like poking fun at
Mhm.
situations or at the perpetrator. But they do a really good job of like weaving in comedy and true crime. It's
Yeah.
pretty incredible.
Well, there's one that we listened to that I did not know that I was going to love it as much as we did, and my wife was totally in on it too. And I'm trying to make sure I get the title right, but you should totally check it out. And it is called, here we go, Missing Richard Simmons. And so,
Oh,
have you heard of that one?
I have not.
So what the whole idea is that I mean, everybody knows who Richard Simmons is. Well, several
Mhm.
years ago, out of nowhere, Richard Simmons decided he didn't want to be in the spotlight anymore and told nobody and just disappeared. And so this whole podcast is one of his biggest fans and who had a friendship with him and stuff, trying to figure out like, where is he? Why is he choosing not to be in front of anybody? It was so it's not necessarily a crime per se, but I mean, and it doesn't end with any answers because as anybody who follows it knows, Richard Simmons still has chosen not to be seen in public in years. And so it was such an interesting show. So total side note, check that one out for sure. Cassie
I will.
Stevens, who does tons of art stuff, she recommended it to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I was so hooked.
Oh, I can't wait. That's what I will be listening to today.
Well, Shane, as we wrap up today's conversation, and we just randomly got on a tangent there, I always love to end these with the same question, and that is, I believe as people we hold certain things true to who we are and the foundation of what we do. And so, if people were to walk away with one thing today, what would your one thing be for them?
Ooh. I'll leave them with what my father had said to us, and it is be the flame in your life. Make sure that you are the one that is brightening someone's day, that is leading, and that is strong in there for others as well.
I love that. Well, Shane, you are doing incredible work, and I was thrilled to be able to chat with you today. So thank you so much for making some time for Tell Your Story.
Thanks so much for having me. This was so fun.
And thank you everybody for listening or watching another episode of Tell Your Story. Remember, you can check out past episodes on iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your stuff, it's there. I hope today's conversation with Shane has encouraged you to get out there and tell your story because every story matters.